On today's episode, we recap another interesting study that takes a look at whether genetics and catchability of fish determines how much or little they move when tracked. We also take a look at some Black Friday deals that are out there on the internet right now. Major League Fishing wraps up their team series for the season, and we answer your questions about budget pedal kayaks, jerkbaits, and glide bait storage. All that and more on this episode of Tackle Talk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
Welcome to the Tackle Talk podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. World-class fishing gear, unmatched personal service. Now, here's your host, Andrew Hayes.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Tackle Talk podcast. As always, we are brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. And if you haven't gone to ALF in the past week or so, what are you doing? They're running their Black Friday sales a few weeks early, all the way up until after Black Friday. So go check them out this week before you miss out. Right now on AmericanLegacyFishing.com, you can get 25% off all Dobbins rods, 40% off all Berkeley baits, 20% off all Beast Coast, 30% off all Sunline, 20% off all Baits reels, 25% off Yamamoto, 25% off Phoenix rods, 30% off Fenwick rods, 35% off select G Loomis ice rods, 20% gift card rebates on Powerhouse Lithium, $100 off Orochi XX rods from Megabass, and so much more over on the website, AmericanLegacyFishing.com. Also, for you Megabass folks out there, they have an exclusive color of the Megabass Vision 110 that is only available at American Legacy Fishing. American Legacy Fishing worked directly with Megabass to get this color in stock. It is GP Avocado. And if you're looking for a great kind of gizzard shad, green gizzard color for a jerkbait this fall and winter, we've got the color for you. It's right over at AmericanLegacyFishing.com, but you're going to want to act fast because once they're gone forever. They're not coming back. These are only available through AmericanLegacyFishing.com. So go check them out, www.AmericanLegacyFishing.com. And as always, if what you're looking for is not on sale, use code TACKLETALK10, and that'll help you out a little bit too. But again, www.AmericanLegacyFishing.com. All right, folks, the first thing up here, as promised, we have some final results from the Major League Fishing General Tire Team Series Summit Cup that just ended Friday, November 22nd, down in Florida. And this is your final Team Series event of the year for Major League Fishing. And yes, after this, the Major League Fishing guys are really 100% done for 2024 in terms of top level of competition and things that are done through the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour type deal. So we're going to go through your top four teams in reverse order really quickly here. Fourth place was Team Lucas Oil, which was made up of Terry Scroggins and Britt Myers. Third place went to Team Redcon 1, which was made up of Skeet Reese and John Murray. Second place went to Team Starbright, which was Bobby and Chris Lane. And first place went to Drew Gill and Marshall Robinson with a commanding 38 pounds, 5 ounce margin of victory on the final day, racking up 69 pounds and 11 ounces. Of that 69.11, Drew had 45.15 of that, and Marshall had 23.12. Big Bass went 4 pounds 7 ounces, I believe, for Drew, which I'm pretty sure was the big bass for the entire tournament. So congratulations to Drew Gill, Marshall Robinson, your 2024 Summit Cup champions with Major League Fishing. All right, everybody, next up here, it is, of course, Black Friday week, ladies and gentlemen, and if you thought you were going to get through this episode without your favorite frugal fisherman over here trying to get you some deals and save you some money on some tackle and some rods and reels, you would be wrong. We have to make sure we highlight some of these sales from all over the fishing world, not just American Legacy Fishing. Obviously, you know, American Legacy is running great sales right now, but one of our big missions on this show is to save you money no matter where you shop. We love love the folks at ALF. Support them when you can. But also, that's the fun part about being an unbiased show, is you are going to hear us talk about deals from other people than just our sponsors, because that is why you listen to a show like this versus some others. So we're going to go through some different retailers right now and some of the deals that kind of stuck out to us. Now, the weird part about this is, obviously, this is coming out on Tuesday before Black Friday, which means there are certainly going to be more sales come out and be public after this episode airs on Tuesday. But right now, I want to at least tell you guys about some of the sales that we already do know about, so you have some time to plan here. So, other than American Legacy Fishing's great Black Friday sales that you heard at the top of the show, let's bounce over to someone like Bass Pro and Cabela's. So Bass Pro and Cabela's, obviously the same parent company there. You can get the same deals at both of those stores. They have Pro qualifiers on sale for $79.99, normally $99.99. And then I think if you're a club member, they go down to $69.99. But either way, $20 or $30 off, depending on if you're a club member or not, is a great price for those reels. Very serviceable options in that sub $100 range that's getting harder and harder to find these days. And the Pro Qualifier is still in that range with a one-piece machined aluminum frame, dual braking system, 7 bearings, a soft touch thumb bar, a very, very solid reel that still gets overlooked a little bit, I think, these days, but it should not, because it is a great option in that price range. So other than that, Bass Pro also has 25% off Carbon Light rods and reels, and the white Carbon Light 2.0 rods are really nice, and it's a great sale on them. You can check those out if you're looking for a lightweight rod. Again, that's not going to completely break the bank, but a really nice option. The only thing about the white rods is they're a little bit flashy. They might not be for everybody, but they feel really great. I used a 7-foot medium heavy for a long time, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago for a chatterbait rod that I really liked. Solid rods. But then, as always, when you flip through the 37,000 pages of slippers and socks and hoodies and flannels in their Black Friday catalog, because unfortunately at this point, Bass Pro Shops has realized that soft goods have better profit margins than hard goods do, so they're basically a glorified Kohl's at this point. You have one more interesting piece that's on sale this Black Friday when you get to the very, very back of the book here, and it's the XPS Backpack Tackle Bag that's on sale for $69, normally $100. And this is a backpack that can supposedly hold up to 10 3600 size tackle boxes. Now, it only comes with 4, so you're going to have to buy 6 more, but it can supposedly hold 10, and a $69 backpack is a pretty good deal. A lot of these type of backpacks are going to go into the $120, $150, $160 range these days, all the way up to $200 plus. So you get a $69 version of this. I don't know about durability or quality because this is a relatively new product and I haven't had the chance to pick one up yet, but the price at least is very, very attractive on these, especially on sale for $69. And then Bass Pro Shops has some decent deals on live scope bundles, just like everybody else does, but American Legacy Fishing actually has the exact same bundles, the 106 SV, the 126 SV, with the LVS 34 deucer and black box and all that stuff, the exact same bundles for $50 less than Bass Pro does. So if you're looking for the best price, Bass Pro Shops doesn't have it. Unless you're like a club member, then I think you might get a better price, but for those of us that kind of hold strong every time a staff member at Cabela's or Bass Pro basically assaults you to try and get you to sign up for their club card and credit card and stuff, Bass Pro Shops is not quite the cheapest place for live scope bundles this Black Friday. So that's Bass Pro Shops. If you want to move over to Tackle Warehouse, ironically, as I'm recording this, I tried to get on their website and it is down right now. It says server is temporarily unavailable to service your request due to maintenance downtime or capacity problems. So that's a good start, I guess. That kind of stinks. But from what I saw earlier this week, Tackle Warehouse is basically doing a 20% off Palooza, and it's being released, or at least it was being trenched out like multiple days at a time. So it would be like the first day, they would start the 20% off of rods, and then the next day, it would be the 20% off reels and stuff like that. But the deals stayed in place as the next deal was revealed. So basically, you just wait till the end, and it's almost 20% off of everything. So that seemed pretty standard. Tackle Warehouse does that a lot, kind of these 20% off sales at these big holidays. That's nice to see. If you're looking for certain brands or things that aren't carried other places at better sales, you know you can always fall back to Tackle Warehouse for 20% off. Omnia Fishing kind of looked like they were doing the same thing, 20% off with code Black Friday on most things on the website. Land Big Fish had some good 25% off sales but really only on certain brands. So like Zoom, Yum, RoboWorm, Booyah, and Bandit, I know were a couple that I saw. So you get some of those. If it's not a brand that's there, then you probably look at like ALF, because if it's Berkeley or something, you're going to get 40% at ALF. Or if it's not at either of those, you go to like Tackle Warehouse and at least you get a 20%. So there's all kinds of ways that you can kind of look and go down your priority list to figure out, all right, where is the best sale? So a lot of these people that have brand specific sales like Land Big Fish or like American Legacy Fishing, they're going to be better than your websites that have these blanket sales of 20% off like Omni and Tackle Warehouse, but Omni and Tackle Warehouse have that discount on more things. So I usually start at these companies that have the brand specific stuff. So if I want Dobbins, if I want Fenwick, if I want Berkeley, or I want Yamamoto or things like that, then I start at somewhere like ALF. If I want Booyah or RoboWorm or Bandit or Zoom or things like that, start at Land Big Fish. And then if what you're looking for is not on either of those type of things, then you fall back to an Omnia or a Tackle Warehouse for 20%. Other than that, you had, I think Land Big Fish also had some buy one, get one free sales on like Lew's, American Hero, IM7s, and Mach 1s and things like that. Duckett had some good sales on Jacob Wheeler rods or the Green Ghost rods. If you like those, they were like almost half off. Fish USA had buy one, get one free all Mustad hooks. So if you like Mustad, I love Mustad. I think they're great hooks. You get buy one, get one free on anything Mustad over on Fish USA. And then again, basically American Legacy is your best choice if you're looking for anything specifically from Sunline, Dobbins, Berkeley, Baits, Fenwick, Phoenix, Yamamoto, Beast Coast, or those Live Scope bundles. They're at least as good or better than everybody else out there for those specific brands that I've seen so far this week. So there's a really quick rundown to kind of help you hopefully prioritize where you're going and give you an idea on what websites to look for certain brands. And as we get a little closer again to Black Friday, there will be sales that pop up. You'll also want to check places like Amazon because they're going to have a lot of things, especially accessories or things that aren't name brand. They always have great flash sales on things like that. So if you need things for the kayak or the boat or things that aren't necessarily so specific tackle oriented, but just things you need to go fishing. So, clothes, boots, waders, sunglasses, headlamps, like that kind of stuff, then Amazon is definitely a great place to kind of keep your eye out and look for those type of sales. But other than that, it is the best time of year to buy gear now. 'Tis the season. Treat yourself, save some money, and enjoy this week because obviously once we blink, all of these sales are going to be gone next week. All right, everybody, we'll get back to the episode here in just a second, but first we are brought to you in part by Dakota Lithium Batteries. And listen up right now, if you have ever thought about buying a Dakota Lithium battery, there is no better time than this week to buy one. That is because they have their Black Friday sales going on right now where you can save a buttload of money, even more than normal, on a Dakota Lithium battery. If you use code BLACKFRIDAY24 on the website, you can save up to $450 on a brand new trolling motor battery or kayak motor battery, because that code BLACKFRIDAY24 is going to save you 20% off the 24 volt 60 amp hour, the 36 volt 60 amp hour, the 24 volt 110 amp hour, or the 36 volt 110 amp hour. That 24 volt 60 amp hour battery that is in this sale is the exact battery I use. I would not trade it for the world, and the fact that you can save 20% off of it right now is a little crazy. Also, if you need a trolling motor battery, right there, 24 volts, 36 volts, but even if you need a 12 volt battery, for everything else other than those 4 batteries I just mentioned, you can use code SEASONENDSALE, all one word, SEASONEND SALE, season end sale. All one word is going to save you 15% off everything else on the website. So 15% off everything, but then 20% off select models, including that 24 volt 60 amp hour, the 36 volt 60 amp hour, 24 volt 110, and 36 volt 110, all with code BLACKFRIDAY24 for those batteries. Everything else on the website, 15% off with code season end sale. So head over, hurry. This offer expires November 30th, 2024. You don't want to miss out. This is the biggest sale that I've seen in a long time from Dakota Lithium. You don't want to miss out. If you've been on the fence, this is the week to do it. Code season end sale for 15% off everything, or code BLACKFRIDAY24 for those 4 specific batteries that we mentioned at the top. Again, www.dakotalithium.com, the official lithium battery of Bassmaster. Okay, everybody, next up here on the show today, I want to take a few minutes and tell you all about a really cool study that was done by our buddy and past guest, Zach Slagle, with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources Division of Wildlife. So I got the chance to sit through a live webinar that Zach did this past week in partnership with Sea Grant, and they were talking about one of their most recent tracking studies that they conducted up on Lake Erie for smallmouth. And if you think back, we've actually had Zach on before, probably a year or two ago, to talk about another study that he did where they tracked smallmouth on Lake Erie, but that was more after the release of a tournament on Lake Erie to see how quickly or if at all those smallmouth actually migrated back to their home waters and made it back kind of to where they came from or where they were caught in the first place before they were transported to that tournament weigh-in on Lake Erie. So if you want to listen to that episode, just go back in our catalog and search Zach Slagle, ZAK Slagle. You'll probably find it in our back catalog again, probably a year or two ago at this point. I don't know the exact date, but he did a great job in that episode of breaking down what they found from that study. But now they've done another study, not so much focused on tracking smallmouth movement after the release from a tournament, but just tracking smallmouth in general and by their personality and what they call vulnerability. So I know I'm not like a fisheries biologist or anything, but I'm going to do my best to give you guys kind of the Cliff's Notes of this study and what he talked about in this webinar and some interesting findings that they had. So he began by talking about some of the big changes on Lake Erie that they've seen over the past few decades, including the introduction and popularization of catch and release for smallmouth bass versus back in the day where you just went out and pulled as big a stringer as you could out of the lake and everything was harvested. Now there's so much catch and release up there. He also talked about the introduction of more and more bass tournaments in the popular areas of Lake Erie, including like the Bass Islands area. And then he started talking about different fish personalities. And in a full circle moment, he cited a study done by Stephen Cook, who, if that name sounds familiar, that's because we were lucky enough to have Dr. Cook on this past year to review a different research study that he did about whether or not soda really helps gill injuries. A lot of you guys really enjoyed that episode. Just kind of ironic that he cited another study done by Dr. Cook in this webinar. So that was cool. But the study that he cited from Dr. Cook was done in Illinois, I think he said, and they basically fish at this pond over a period of time. And I believe they tag and keep track of every fish that they catch from this pond. And they release them, and they eventually start catching some fish multiple times, and they make note of that every time they've caught that same specific fish. And then, down the road, they actually drain that entire pond, and they stock the fish that they'd caught multiple times in one new pond, and then the fish that they never caught in another pond. And their goal was to separate what they called high vulnerability fish, which basically means fish that are more likely to be caught and fall victim to, artificial lure and things like that, to low vulnerability fish, which are fish that are not as likely to be caught or hit a lure. And throughout this study, they learned that basically vulnerability can be hereditary in bass, and it can be passed down to their offspring. So the next generation of fish in each of those two ponds, I believe, exhibited kind of similar behaviors to their parents. One pond was full of high vulnerability fish, one pond full of low vulnerability fish. So that was kind of a cool thing that I learned just from this study, not even from Zach's study, because he hasn't even got to his study at this point in the webinar. He's just kind of setting the stage at this point. But then he went on to describe what the traits of high vulnerability and low vulnerability fish are. High vulnerability fish basically mean they're easier to catch, they're better at guarding nests, which I guess makes sense. That's why we probably catch them more often. They're more protective, and they have higher metabolisms. So again, makes sense why they would be more likely to eat a lure than a low metabolism fish. And then on the flip side, low vulnerability fish, you guessed it, are harder to catch, they're worse at guarding nests, they're less protective, and they have lower metabolisms. So we're beginning to put together why some fish are easier to catch than others, why some days fishing is hard, why some days fishing is easier. Fish are individuals, and they're different, and they have their own tendencies and personalities and hereditary traits that make them more or less likely to be caught by us anglers. So then the question is, what about the movement of these fish? That's obviously the majority of what Zach and his folks study with these tracking studies. So he basically said, if there's low movement in fish, then that can lead to overfishing in certain popular areas, because again, that makes sense. Pressured fish aren't leaving, and new fish aren't coming in. New low vulnerability fish aren't filling their place. So that kind of makes sense to me. But then when you factor in tournament displacement, so if anglers are out there, just catching fish and transporting them all over this lake from one specific area to weigh-in, he said those fish from that specific area are what he called functionally harvested, meaning that for the sake of that specific fishing spot where a tournament angler catches a bunch of fish, takes them to a weigh-in, and does not obviously bring them back to the spot where he caught them, those fish might as well have been killed and eaten for the sake of that specific spot, not for the entire population of the lake, but for that fishing spot, because they're so unlikely to make it back to that spot after released. So one of the things he said he saw in this initial study, and this goes back to the study that even we talked about with Zach back in the day, it showed relatively low movement in Lake Erie smallmouth bass as a whole. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't outlier fish, because there were, but as a whole, you're not getting big movements or big migrations of these fish. They just kind of stay where they're at for the most part. Now, the Ohio Sea Grant funded this new project that Zach was a part of with a $60,000 investment to buy 200 plus tags to put on smallmouth to study the movement of high vulnerability and low vulnerability fish. So they used angling to obviously capture the high vulnerability fish. That makes sense. Those fish that are more likely to eat a lure actually eat the lure and get caught. And those are used for that population of fish for the study. And then they electrofished the control. So capturing all different fish, not just by personality. So there, you're actually going to get a lot more low vulnerability fish in that population. So they would tag them with these acoustic transmitters, not jaw tags anymore, not the old school way, full on radio signal transmitters. And he said they basically implant them surgically in these fish's bellies, and they're the size of like a single A battery. So they put those in really lightweight, doesn't really hurt the fish, but just a way for them to get a lot more data than just a jaw tag. And then they also put a fin clip tag on them, basically to say, hey, this is a study fish if for some reason anybody catches it. And then he said those fish that actually get that acoustic transmitter implanted in them, that can be picked up by these various acoustic receivers all around Lake Erie from up to a mile away. So that is a crazy range. Now, obviously, Lake Erie, a huge lake, a mile is nothing in Lake Erie, but still an impressive feat to be able to pick up that signal under the water at a mile away from a receiver. So he said Lake Erie has, I think, like roughly 500 receivers out there all over the lake. So when a fish gets within 1 mile of those receivers, it pings it, that data is saved. Now, the only thing that's interesting is that it's not live data. So this data gets captured, it gets stored on probably like an SD card or something, and then you actually have to go out to the receiver, pull that data off that receiver physically. So you have to go in, snag the thing, pull up the receiver, probably take a little chip out, export the data onto a computer or an iPad or something, and then you can see the radar hits. So fish are not just out there swimming and hitting these receivers right now, and we're able to track them in real time. You wouldn't even know these fish are moving until you actually go out there and pull the data physically from the receivers, which takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. But overall in this study, he said that there were 96 fish that were tagged from fishing, so those high vulnerability fish, and of those 96 fish, 91 of those fish registered movements on their receivers. So they got data from 91 of those high vulnerability fish. Then there were about 120 fish that they caught through electrofishing and tagged, so those are those low vulnerability fish, and of those 120 low vulnerability fish, 90 of those registered movement on the receivers as well. So 90 high vulnerability fish, 91 low vulnerability fish, respectively. So a very even sample size between the two groups. And when they compiled the findings, basically, he said that most of the fish do not move that much, which we obviously already knew from some other studies, but he said they had a few oddballs. He said they had one fish that swam all the way across Lake Erie and back. He said he had one fish that actually migrated into St. Clair for the summer and then came back out to main Lake Erie in the winter and the fall, but generally very low movement, staying close to where they were tagged, and they saw that in both personalities. But here's the big capital B-U-T, and probably the most interesting thing they found in the study. When you look at the data more closely, the high vulnerability fish that were actually caught from fishing did move a little bit more than the low vulnerability fish. It was almost double the movement that they saw with high vulnerability fish compared to low vulnerability fish. So that's interesting. In those genetics, not only are those high vulnerability fish more likely to bite a lure, they're more likely to protect their nests better, they're more likely to have a higher metabolism, but they're also more likely to move longer distances in the water. And that, I think, is pretty interesting research. So some other cool tidbits they have: all of the fish showed most of their movements in April by far, which makes sense, obviously spawn time, but the second biggest movement they had from the whole population was September, right as fall is beginning. That was when they saw the secondary peak of those fish moving. But the big takeaways here, he summarized it basically in 2 sentences. Smallmouth can move further than once thought, but most movement is still fairly limited, and high vulnerability fish may move more than low vulnerability fish. So I thought that was a really interesting study. Smallmouth metabolism, protectiveness, catchability, and now movement might all very well be hereditary in smallmouth bass. Cool stuff from Zach Slagle and his team over the Ohio Department of Natural Resources and Division of Wildlife. Again, I was lucky enough to be able to sit through this webinar, and I thought it would be something worthy of passing along to you all, the listeners. Okay, everybody, and finally here, let's wrap up with a couple questions out of the mailbag, powered by Dakota Lithium.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast Mailbag, powered by Dakota Lithium Batteries. Adventure awaits at dakotalithium.com.
All right, the first question here is from Ryan, and he says, Andrew, do you know any good starter pedal kayaks under $1,000? And how do you hold rods in your kayak? Thanks, Ryan. Okay, so first off, how do I hold rods in my kayak? My kayak, the one I'm in now, so the Hobie Outback, it has 2 rod holders directly behind the seats, one on the right, one on the left, obviously. I use those for about a year. I hate them because they're too close to your back cast. They make absolutely no sense in terms of anybody that wants to actually cast well, standing up or sitting down. So I actually just recently bought a Blackpack Pro. I bought it off one of my buddies, and I mounted rod holders to that. So now I'm a little bit better because my rod holders are further back in my kayak, so I'm not smacking my rods on back casts. But the best way, if I had a kayak that was set up for it, those like rod stager type deals that are off to your right or left and keep your rods level with your kayak, so they're actually laid down long ways and they're not sticking up so you can't hit them. Those seem like the best option to me. It's just the way that I have my kayak rigged, I don't have space for those. So yeah, those would be my first choice. My second would be try and put some sort of rod holders in the back of your kayak. Just try and get them as far back as possible. So that means maybe putting a milk crate back there and mounting a couple tubes, of PVC to the side or something so you can get your rods further back. The second part of your question here, a pedal kayak under $1,000. That, unfortunately, is a very tough question to answer because most pedal kayaks now and almost all of your big names, Hobie, Old Town, people like that, are going to be well over $1,000. I wish it wasn't so, but that's just the price of a good pedal fishing kayak nowadays. So the Old Town 106 PDL is like $2,600. The Hobie Outback that I have is like $3,300. It's crazy. Even the Passports from Hobie are like $1,700, and they're very bare bones. But there are a few brands out there that I know do offer pedal kayaks just under that $1,000 mark. The first one I can think of is Brooklyn. My dad actually has a paddle Brooklyn kayak that he really likes. He uses it up here in Ohio. But that Brooklyn company offers a 10-foot pedal kayak for $971 on sale right now. I just looked it up. And basically, it's like a Hobie knockoff. They knocked off the Hobie Mirage Drive after the patent ran out, like a lot of other brands did. So it is that sort of flipper type system. It's not like a bicycle system, a lot more just like, push back and forth, right, left, and then it kind of sweeps these fins under your kayak. So that version of a pedal kayak kayak is available from Brooklyn for $971. I think they just call it the Brooklyn 10.0 single pedal kayak, but that is a very affordable pedal kayak with that proven Mirage Drive type system. So that's an option. You also have options from, I think the company's called Hoodoo, and they make more of like a bicycle pedal system, so kind of like the Old Towns, but theirs are like $799. I'm pretty sure they're called like Hoodoo Voyagers, but those are really the only two I can think of off the top of my head that are truly under $1,000. There are probably other ones out there. Those are the two that I know of that I've seen fairly recently. But with that, you might sacrifice like customer service and warranty and things like that, I would imagine, by going cheaper. I don't know for sure, but you're at least getting a pedal kayak that you're looking for in that price range. All right, the next question here is from Jermaine, and he says, "Hey, Andrew, really enjoy the show. Thanks for making my Tuesdays more tolerable. I have a question about glide baits. After listening to a few of your shows, I finally pulled the trigger and bought a couple, and I've enjoyed learning the ins and outs of big bait fishing. My one problem seems to be storing them. How do you store your glide baits to take them with you on the water? Thanks, Jermaine." Good question. So this is one of those, if you ask like 20 different anglers, you're going to get 20 different answers because everybody feels like they've got the best answer for how to store glide baits. And it is one of those that there truly is no perfect option out there, at least that I've seen. You're going to make a couple sacrifices no matter what way you choose. Now, we'll do a little time traveling here because I'm recording this portion of the episode on Friday night. And then immediately after recording this, I think I'm going to make a little short video and show you exactly what I mean by my answer in this question. And then I'll just post it on Instagram and YouTube and things like that. Just a little short, or whatever you call them, reels, or whatever platform you're on. But now, if you're listening to this on Tuesday and you've actually seen those videos, I guess, if I'm going to post that tonight, then you might already know the answer to this and you might have got a little bit of a spoiler. But for the rest of you, I've tried quite a few things over the past year or two. Now, admittedly, I'm not the best organizer. You all know this. We talked about it last week. We've talked about it a million times. It's not my strength, but when you're spending $100, $150, $175 on each bait sometimes with glide baits, even I know that I should probably take care of those baits a little better and be somewhat organized with them. So I've tried bait wraps, I've tried bigger boxes, I even tried those little sleeves, I think they're called like Supras, that Spro was selling for a while. They might still have them, but I didn't really love any of those options. And then a few weeks ago, like I talked about a few minutes ago, I bought a Yak Attack Black Pack off of my buddy, so I was trying to turn over a new leaf and kind of keep my kayak a little bit more organized. And then when I went to buy tackle trays for that Black Pack, of course, I cheaped out and I went with the Flambeau cases that are like $4 a piece at Cabela's because I needed like 6 or 8 of them. And I just for fun threw one of my KGB glide baits in one when I was going through and reorganizing some stuff. And at first, it didn't look like it fit. But then I took it out, I moved it ever so slightly, and with one hook on one side of that bait and the other hook on the other side of that bait, it sits belly down straight up in that tackle tray and fits perfectly. And because it's standing up and down and kind of balanced there, it keeps that tail vertical and uncrimped. And I thought, that's kind of cool. Obviously, this one fits. So then I went out in my garage and I picked up a few more of my bigger glide baits. And to my surprise, the Spro version of the Chad Shad fits in there too. And then a Taxi Shad fit in there. And then a Tado fit in there. My Bull Shads fit in there. And before I knew it, all of my glide baits were organized in a single $4 Flambeau, I think the 4007 or 4007, however you want to say it, size box, belly down, 2 in each row with the tails protected. And when I closed it and shook it around, they didn't tangle at all, no matter how hard I shook that box. And that, for now, is going to be how I'm organizing my glide baits. It's the best option I've found, a cheap $4 Flambeau 4007 case. I'm not sure if people call it 4007 or 4007, whatever, but that size case that's kind of like their version of a Plano 3600 size box. Now, will all of your glide baits fit in it? Maybe not. Anything bigger than that sort of 6 or 7 inch might not fit, but for those small to mid-size glides, which is really all I have, I don't have any big Kings or anything like that, it works for all of the glides that I want to take with me. A cheap, efficient option, and that's been my best fit so far. All right, and the last question here is from Terry, and it says, short and sweet, I think we got 4 words here. What's your favorite jerkbait? Pretty straightforward question there. I like it. I bounce between a few. If you ask me right now, gun to my head, I can only pick one jerkbait to take out with me tomorrow. The past 2 or 3 months, it's been a Jackal re-range. The re-range 110 and RT Hollow Minnow has been my go-to. My main one looks like it got put in like a blender. It's so scratched up and beat up from fish catches and stuff. But that's probably my best, kind of good mojo jerkbait lately. Some others that I really like, we've talked about them before, the Lucky Craft Pointer, a good old Smithwick Suspending Rogue, a Vision 110 this time of year. Even though they're expensive, they shine in that super cold water where you need something to stop on a dime, stay there, not move, let that fish come up and nose it, give 20, 30 seconds in between those jerks. Then a Vision 110, it's kind of hard to beat in that cold water. So right now, those 110s shine if you want to fork over the money for one, but there aren't really too many jerkbaits I don't like. I guess I don't absolutely love the Berkeley Stunna, or for that matter, the new Rapala Maverick that they came out with. Both of those I will use from time to time. They're just not two that I generally reach for first. But for me, Jackal re-range, Lucky Craft Pointer, probably my 2 go-tos, and then a Smithwick Rogue, especially if I'm going multi-species for like walleye or sawguy too. All right, everybody, that is today's episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. As always, shoot me an email if you want to talk, tackletalkpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on the internet, tackletalkpodcast.com. There you can actually submit your own mailbag questions to be heard on an upcoming episode. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, @Tackle Talk Podcast, YouTube @Tackle Talk Podcast, and we'll see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.
Thank you for listening to the Tackle Talk Podcast. Tackle Talk is produced by Andrew Hayes. Copyright 2021. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.